Taptajivanam Kavimiriditam Kalvasapaham Sarvanamangalam Shrivadatatam Bhuvigunanti Vidyatana. This verse is traditionally chanted before the reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and M includes it, not in the English, in the Bengali version. It'll be on the first page. This is a verse from the Bhagavata Purana, Gopi Gita, and it's supposed to be addressed to Sri Krishna, but since M looked upon Sri Ramakrishna as an avatar who was identical with Rama and Krishna, that he uses this verse, and everything that the gopis are saying about Sri Krishna, he says about Sri Ramakrishna. So it says, Tavagatamratam, that your words are like nectar, tapta jivanam. They bring life to scorched souls. Now this is very significant in the life of M, because I think most of you know the story, huh? M was living with his wife and family in his father's house and was very unhappy, and didn't get along with his other brothers who were there, and they made fun of him. He was the only one who was really had a spiritual bent, and his life was miserable. In fact, when we go through the entire gospel, we see so many times that Sri Ramakrishna is asking him, did you make up with your father? Did you go back home? Because it was unbearable for him to live there. And Thakur always wanted him to go back and lead a harmonious life with the rest of the family, where he wouldn't have to worry about so much living on his own. He had to always worry about making enough money and everything. So this was a constant theme. So things reached such a point that M thought that he would commit suicide. So he decided to leave. We don't know exactly how he was thinking, because he made arrangements for the whole family to leave, and they were going to stay in somebody's home, and then they went, and the carriage that they were in, the axle broke, and they had to go to another friend's house, and then they got a very rude reception there. Everything was going wrong for him. Finally, he ended up in his nephew's house, or the relative's house. This Siddheshwari, Siddhu was his name. And his nephew saw that he was in a terrible state of mind. So he said, Uncle, tomorrow, let me take you to a few places. There are some very nice garden areas and temples and things, just to lift up his mind a little bit. So he took him to several places, and then just at sunset, he said, there's a beautiful new temple. Rani Rashmani has built this temple with a beautiful garden area. It's the Kali temple. Let me take you there. And when Sri Ramakrishna goes, we'll read about that very first visit. He immediately compares it to the scene of the Bhagavata, that he felt as if he were in the presence of Shukadeva, who was giving this recitation of the Bhagavata to King Parikshit, and was surrounded by all the sages and everything. And immediately after his first introduction with Sri Ramakrishna, he realized that there was some purpose to his life. And later on, he used to say that Sri Ramakrishna not only gave him his spiritual life, but gave him his real life, saved him from taking his own life that way. So when M uses this phrase, tapta jivanam, he was tapta, he was being scorched in the world, and Thakur gave him his life back. So, Tavagatamradam, tapta jivanam, kavibhirididham, praised by poets, kalamishapaham, removing all sin, shravanamangalam, just listening to the recitation of the Katamrita, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, is auspicious. As auspicious as listening to the Vedas, chanting the Vedas, or anything. This has a power, this book, to change a life. It's the most powerful book that I've ever seen. That if you go deeply into this book, you'll find you're entering into a new world. M did such a fantastic job of creating a scene that you feel that you're there. He'll tell you each and every person in the room, what direction everyone is facing, where they're sitting. He'll remember all the song, everything. It's just fantastic. M had this prodigious memory that way. There's a very nice story about how he got caught. He was caught by his students, how they found out that he was writing this Kodamrita. One of his students was named Kali Krishna, who later became Swami Virajananda. He was the first of the batch of monks to join who weren't direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And he took Diksha from Holy Mother and Sannyas from Swamiji. He was a very wonderful president of the order for many, many years. Very wonderful Swami. He was one of the students at M school. And there were several of them. They used to go to Ramchandra Datta's place. Ramchandra Datta, he was Swamiji's cousin, uncle, you could say, and a great householder devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, who became kind of a guru on his own. He would take others, these young boys, and try to guide their lives and mold their lives. And anyhow, so they were familiar with Sri Ramakrishna. And they had a very sweet relationship with M, who was their teacher, but also had great affection for them. Anyhow, they noticed that at lunchtime, everyone else would go and have their lunch and would disappear. So this Kali Krishna, he decided to follow him one day, and he saw that M went up to the roof and would sit very quietly. He had some notes, something scribbled there. He would read his note, then he would sit and go into deep meditation, then he would write something down. So this Kali Krishna, he had a little freedom with M. So he asked him, Master Masha, what are you doing? And then he told him, he explained to him, that when I was with Sri Ramakrishna, as soon as I would go home, I would write in my journal just some cryptic notes, things that I would understand, others wouldn't understand. If we read his journal, it's very hard to know what it was, but it was kind of a shorthand for him. He said, when I go back and read the notes of that day, and I sit and I close my eyes, the whole scene comes back to my inner mind. You can say, hey, everything is there. And I remember exactly who said what, when they said it, everything. It just comes back like that. And he wrote everything down. And this is how the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna was recorded that way. So this Sharavana Mangalam, just to listen to this, is to participate in some type of magic. How M was able to do it. He was the Vyasa of this Leela. How he was able to record the direct words of the avatar. So it's something wonderful. Sharavana Mangalam Shrivadadatam. They're beautiful, they're exalted, they're high poetry. Bhuvi Varnantiye Bhuridadina. Did I miss anything? Tavagatamritam Tapte Jivanam Kavivarididam Kadachapaham Sharavana Mangalam Shrimadadana Bhuvi Varnantiye Bhuridadina. Those who will spread these teachings, who will read this, who make this available to the world, these are the greatest, they're giving the greatest gift imaginable. Yeah, so they're the most generous in people. So this was the verse, a very appropriate verse that M chose to be chanted before the recitation of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And this is a book that is to be read every day. It's not something to read once, it's not something to pick up on occasion. This really, if we can make this part of our regular sadhana, to read at least a portion, a little bit every day, it would really sweeten our spiritual life. When I first read this, I couldn't put it down. I would read it every night. I would spend about an hour reading it, and I had the abridged version. So that meant that every couple of weeks I'd go back and read it again until I bought the big one. And then, of course, the same thing. I just got so much joy out of reading it, and only to be able to read it in the original. That's why I learned Bengali. That was my only reason at that time, of course. So then I would go through it, the English and the Bengali next to each other, and try to figure out what this meant with my dictionary, look up everything. And so this is a lifetime study, and it's a spiritual discipline. Shravana Mangalam is something highly auspicious. So I can't praise it enough, and I can't recommend it enough as part of daily spiritual sadhana to read this and to have a special time for it, and to do it with great reverence, because this is just something very, very special. And the very first meetings, this is also very important, how they meet each other, how Sri Ramakrishna's reaction to him, just everything about it. And M, he had such reverence for the things that Sri Ramakrishna said, that he had a whole list of things that he called Mahavakyas. Thakur would say something, it would be equally holy as any Mahavakya from the Vedas, from the Upanishads. He had a whole list of things that he called Upadesh, that anything that Thakur said to him that was meant for him as a spiritual instruction, this was a Upadesh, this was inviolable. You don't question this. He had such faith in the words of Sri Ramakrishna. When Sri Ramakrishna said to him, we'll get to this maybe today, when he was hesitant to go to Balaram Bose's house, he said, he may be a wealthy man, I need an introduction or something like that. When he said, you take my name. So this is almost, I'm thinking this is his initiation, to repeat the name of Sri Ramakrishna. He took things that way. Yeah, this is the type of devotion one needs to be a real shishya, to be a real disciple. That type of devotion to the Guru, that he would say something, take my name, then they'll let you in. They won't have any problem like that. So yeah, it's fantastic. This relationship between the two of them was as special as the relationship between Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji. And his role was equally important. Without him, others took notes and others wrote some things, but nothing compared to this. And Sri Ramakrishna left them in the world as the example of the Grihi sannyasi. M was dying to take sannyasa. He always felt that he was kind of left out. He had that real desire. He asked Sri Ramakrishna so many times. And Sri Ramakrishna said, no, you remain in the world, but live like a sannyasi. And he did, to such a tremendous degree. Most of the time he lived alone. He would go out. Was it Metropolitan College? One of the places where he taught, there's a big open veranda in front of it, and homeless people would sleep there. So M would take his blanket and he would go out there and sleep among the homeless. Yeah, just to get that feeling, have thou no home, what home can hold thee friend, the sky, the roof, the rest of it. Just to feel like he was a sannyasi with no possessions. And everything he spoke was Sri Ramakrishna. You couldn't get him to talk about anything else. Anybody who went there, and he used to say, I'm an insignificant person, but I live near this huge ocean, and from time to time I can take these pitchers full of water and distribute them to other people. Otherwise, he had this perfect humility. So this was him. The very first entry is listed as February 1882, because M had no idea at that time that it would be important and to remember each and every date and everything. So in the beginning, he just knew it was sometime in February. And he doesn't tell the whole background and everything. M tries to remain absent throughout. This is one of the secrets. And he uses so many pseudonyms. Mani Mohan. And of course, M, he doesn't use his name. His name is Mahendranath Gupta. You won't find it anywhere here. So he'll use different nicknames, sometimes Englishmen. sometimes just a bhakta, a devotee. And sometimes there's Mani Mohan and other. Whenever it's some personal thing, you'll read something, who is this person talking about the death of his son? That's him. Yeah, so he tried to remain hidden and didn't want to bring any personal things into it. It was on a Sunday in spring, a few days after Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, that M met him the first time. So he refers to himself in the third person. He won't say, I met him. M met him for the first time. Sri Ramakrishna lived at the Kalibari, the temple garden of Mother Kali, on the bank of the Ganges at Dakshineshwar. M, being at leisure on Sundays, see, he's not saying anything about this state of mind, had gone with his friend Shidhu. Now this Shidhu, who was not just his friend, his relative, we don't find another single instance of him going to see Sri Ramakrishna. His name is not mentioned here. We don't hear anything about him after that. This is the meaning of Leela. This was the role that he had to play in this Leela.
Just that.
Nothing else was necessary after that. Yeah, he was the marriage broker. Yeah, he arranged the marriage and left. His role was done. Siddheshwari. And being in leisure on Sundays, had gone with his friend Shidhu to visit several gardens at Varanagore. Probably he says friend, so they won't trace it back to who M actually was, rather than relative. He was relative on his mother's side. Was it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. It is
Or wife's side. His wife was a relative of Keshav. Yeah. So he had that close connection with Keshav and with the Brahmo Samaj from early days. Had gone with his friend Shidhu to visit several gardens at Varanagore. As they were walking in Prasanna Banerjee's garden, Shidhu said, "There is a charming place on the bank of the Ganges where a Paramahamsa lives. Should you like to go there?" M assented, and they started immediately for the Dakshineshwar temple garden. They arrived at the main gate at dusk and went straight to Sri Ramakrishna's room. And there they found him seated on a wooden couch facing the east. How many people have been to his room? How many people haven't been to his room? Okay, can I make a suggestion? Go. Go there. Yeah. I'll tell you about my first visit, huh? And not the whole story, but anyhow. And there they found him seated on a wooden couch facing the east. With a smile on his face, he was talking of God. The room was full of people, all seated on the floor, drinking in his words in deep silence. M stood there speechless. His life was about to change. Speechless and looked on. It was as if he were standing where all the holy places met, and as if Shukadeva himself were speaking the word of God, or as if Sri Chaitanya were singing the name and glories of the Lord in Puri with Ramananda, Swarup, and the other devotees. Yeah, M got there just as the sun was setting, his arati was going on. He heard the bells and the kantas and everything. That's also when I got there the first time. And I had gone to Bellarmut first. And after seeing all the temples and everything, took the ferry across just as the sun was going down. Got there just as we could hear all the everything going on, the arati sounds, and went into Sri Ramakrishna's room. And really felt that, he dropped off the face of the earth and entered into a whole different realm. Only Sri Ramakrishna wasn't there. Otherwise, everything the same. Only he was there. You could really feel his presence. I hadn't read the Gospel yet. I read it afterwards. So when I first read it, and it says he was facing east, I knew I could picture where he was sitting. But I had read enough. I had read a short version of his life and Swamiji's life and everything that I knew where I was going and everything. It wasn't just some by chance thing. Sri Ramakrishna said, "When hearing the name of a Hari or Rama once, you shed tears and your hair stands on end. then you may know for certain that you do not have to perform such devotions as the Sandhya anymore. This was one of the important teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. He used to talk about two distinct types of bhakti. One is Vaidhi bhakti, and the other is, he gave different terms, raga, raganurag, different terms of this type of bhakti. I saw on the board up there that you were studying this, huh? Writing something.
Swami B.
Oh, Swami B did that, yeah. So the Vaidhi bhakti, this is the beginning period when we have some routine, we have some family traditions, maybe we do some chanting, we do some rituals, everything. We do it until we reach this higher stage, which is a spontaneous stage. We're overflowing with love, constant remembrance of God. We don't have to make any effort. And Sri Ramakrishna was always of the opinion that one doesn't decide that he's reached that stage. It happens automatically, and we know it. So just as when the sore is healed, the scab falls off on its own. We don't pull it off, it'll bleed again. So he gave different examples that when the fruit is ripe, it'll fall off on its own. We don't have to force anything that way. So this is one test. How do we know we've reached that stage where it's not necessary for us to do any formal type of worship? He said, when hearing the name of Hari Rama once, you shed tears and your hair stands on end, then you may know for certain that you do not have to perform such devotions as the Sandhya anymore. He used to say that Sandhya merges in Gayatri. So we don't have to do all the ritual things. When we get a little more spiritually evolved, then we don't have to do all of the ritual. We can simply repeat Gayatri. Gayatri merges in Om. We reach a point where even Gayatri, we don't have to. It's enough to simply say Om. We fulfill whatever duty we take. If we're Brahmins, we've done our Upanayana and we're supposed to recite Gayatri a certain number of times every day. We're free from that obligation when we reach the stage of Anuraga, the stage of divine love. Then only will you have the right to renounce rituals, or rather, rituals will drop away of themselves. Then it will be enough if you repeat only the name of Rama or Hari, or even simply Om. Continuing, he said, here it is, the Sandhya merges in the Gayatri, and the Gayatri merges in Om. M looked around with wonder and said to himself, what a beautiful place, what a charming man. How beautiful his words are. I have no wish to move from this spot. After a few minutes he said, let me see the place first, then I'll come back here and sit down. As he left the room with Shidhu, he heard the sweet music of the evening service arising in the temple from gong, bell, drum, and cymbal. He could hear music from the Nahavat too. At the south end of the garden there were two Nahavats. The one where Holy Mother stayed, and then one at the very southern part, near Jadu Malik's house, I believe. The sounds traveled over the Ganges, floating away and losing themselves in the distance. Yeah, M's prose is just exquisite. And Bengali has two different types of language, you can say. The one is a very formal Sanskritic type of thing, Shadhu Bhasha. And then the other is Jalti Bhasha, is the way people generally speak. But his prose is a very beautiful Sanskritic formal language, but just beautiful. It just flows. He was very poetic, extremely poetic. So it's not simply that he recorded Sri Ramakrishna's words very correctly. His descriptions were just so literary, so beautiful, that also is something tremendously uplifting. A soft spring wind was blowing, laden with the fragrance of flowers. The moon had just appeared. It was as if nature and man together were preparing for the evening worship. M and Sidhu visited the 12 Shiva temples. The Dakshineshwar temple garden, it's devoted to 3 different deities. With the main temple is the Kali temple, and then there's a line. There's 6 to the north and 6 to the south of the all different Shiva lingams. And then we have the Radhakanta temple for the Govinda. And this is the image that broke and Sri Ramakrishna himself repaired. And the one that he repaired, they've kept separately, so you can still see it, and they have a new one in the main temple. So M and Sidhu visited the 12 Shiva temples, the Radhakanta temple, and the temple of Bhavatarani. Bhavatarani is Kali. And as M watched the services before the image, his heart was filled with joy. I think he was ready to commit suicide. Now, just go into this one place. His heart was filled with joy. On the way back to Sri Ramakrishna's room, the 2 friends talked. Sidhu told him that the temple garden had been founded by Rani Rashmani. He said that God was worshipped there daily as Kali, Krishna, and Shiva, and that within the gates many sadhus and beggars were fed. When they reached Sri Ramakrishna's door again, they found it shut, and Brinde, the maid, standing outside. M, who had been trained in English manners. Yeah, M himself was a school teacher, a headmaster, and started his own school later, and had a brilliant mind. He was very well versed in history and philosophy and literature and everything. M, who had been trained in English manners and would not enter a room without permission, asked her, "Is the holy man in?" Brinde replied, "Yes, he's in the room." M, "How long has he lived there?" Brinde, "Oh, he has been here a long time." Yeah, she didn't know exactly. Sri Ramakrishna lived 32 years in Dakshineshwar.
56 is when he came in, and this is 82. It's already 26 years, and he will go in 85. So about 29 years.
29 years. And the first 16 years, I think, were in that kutir, north of his room. So he lived in that room only the last, say, 15 years or so, something like that. 15, 16 years. M, does he read many books? Brinde, books? Oh dear, no. They are all on his tongue. So it was Mukusta. Yeah, so Mukusta. M had just finished his studies in college. He was actually 24 or something at that time. Something. It amazed him to hear that Sri Ramakrishna read no books. M, perhaps it is time for his evening worship. Sandhya. May we go into the room? Will you tell him we are anxious to see him? Brinde, go right in, children. Go in and sit down. She was quite elderly, Brinde. Entering the room, they found Sri Ramakrishna alone, seated on the wooden couch. Incense had just been burned, and all the doors were shut. As he entered, M, with folded hands, saluted the master. Then, at the master's bidding, he and Sidhu sat on the floor. Sri Ramakrishna asked them, "Where do you live? What is your occupation? Why have you come to Baranagar?" M answered the questions, but he noticed that now and then the master seemed to become absent-minded. Annamanashka, not really absent-minded. Later he learned that this mood is called bhava, ecstasy, especially at sunset. As soon as Sri Ramakrishna, he had a very special thing that as soon as the sun goes down, then one should give up everything, only think of God. Shandha Shamai, Shabkaj Chare, Ishara Shoran Kare. He used to say that, forget everything. When I was in my college student years, I refused to do any schoolwork after sunset.
Oh.
I did everything during the daytime. At night I would only read, do my meditation and read and have my supper and go to sleep. Yeah. I tried to follow these things.
Yes.
We have to be sincere. When we read something, we should try to put it into practice.
You hadn't read Sri Ramakrishna then?
No, I had, after reading that.
Oh, gotcha. And then you
Yeah, yeah,
you have to stop on.
yeah. Swamiji says in one place, only read books written by realized souls.
Yeah.
I never read any novel after that or anything. Some exceptions a little bit later. The one or two things that I read, The Razor's Edge, and just for other reasons. But yeah, anyhow, it's good to be a little fanatical sometimes. No, seriously, yeah. Later he learned that this mood is called bhava, ecstasy. It is like the state of the angler who has been sitting with his rod. Of course, these are Sri Ramakrishna's examples that he gives later. The fish comes and swallows the bait, and the float begins to tremble. The angler is on the alert. He grips the rod and watches the float steadily and eagerly. He will not speak to anyone. Such was the state of Sri Ramakrishna's mind. Later M heard and himself noticed that Sri Ramakrishna would often go into this mood after dusk, sometimes becoming totally unconscious of the outer world. M. Perhaps you want to perform your evening worship. In that case, may we take our leave. Sri Ramakrishna, still in ecstasy. No, evening worship. No, it is not exactly that.
He's explaining.
After a little conversation, M saluted the master and took his leave. Come again, Sri Ramakrishna said. Now this avaresho becomes also a very important thing. That for M this was another adesh, this was another command. And he took this very, very seriously, even though it's a very common thing, everybody says it. But when he heard Sri Ramakrishna say that, he took it in a different way. Yeah, everyone will say avaresho. We don't think too much about it. But to him it was a very, very, very significant thing. On his way home, M began to wonder, who is the serene-looking man who is drawing me back to him? Is it possible for a man to be great without being a scholar? How wonderful it is. I should like to see him again. He himself said, come again.
This is the English, this is the rationalization. I
Yeah.
want to come.
Yeah.
And he found something.
Yeah, he also invited me back.
Yeah.
If he hadn't said that,
Yeah.
then maybe he doesn't want me to come. So at least that much. I shall go tomorrow or the day after. M's second visit to Sri Ramakrishna took place on the southeast veranda. Okay, so this is the interior veranda on the inside of the around the courtyard. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the master was about to be shaved. He would get shaved, but everything was so tender about Sri Ramakrishna that he couldn't get a real shave, a close shave. So we see him always with a beard. So at one time maybe he did, but his skin was too soft that way. So otherwise sadhus never kept a trimmed beard. It's a very unusual thing. Either it'll go very, very long or they'll shave. Either the hair will be very long or either the traditional custom is that once a month, maybe the new moon or something like that, you'll shave head and face and then wait 1 month later do the same thing. Or else never shave. Never shave the beard, never shave the hair. But he was a Paramahamsa. He didn't have to follow any rules. That was the thing about this, the path of the Paramahamsa. They can do whatever they like, they're beyond rules. So he was about to be shaved, the barber having just arrived. As the cold season still lingered, he had put on a moleskin shawl, bordered with red. Some of these things are in M's house. Yeah, if you go to his house, it's right near this Tontonia Siddheshwari Kali temple. There's Guru Prasad land. And now it's under the auspices of the order. But his family members still live there. And there are so many things that Thakur, his slippers and the coat and other things. And the picture that Holy Mother worshipped of him, there are lots of things there. Unless they've been moved now to the museum. But I went years ago. It's another nice place to visit. You've been there, Sudeshna?
Yes,
Yeah.
actually my mom was there.
Ah.
She showed me from outside. I have not been inside.
Ah, okay. Yeah, the M used to stay on the roof, on the top floor, and then go up to the roof. Very, very hot there. But he wanted to avoid the family members. So it would be terribly hot in the hot season, but he did it. Seeing M, the master said, "So you have come, that's good. Sit down here." He was smiling. He stammered a little when he spoke. Sri Ramakrishna to M, "Where do you live?" M, "In Calcutta, sir." Sri Ramakrishna, "Where are you staying here?" M, "I am at Baranagar at my older sister's, Ishan Kaviraj's house."
That is
You know where that is?
No,
Oh.
I'm saying that you asked.
Ah,
which
oh, yes.
side, yeah, which side of relative? His side.
Yeah, older sister. Sri Ramakrishna, "Oh, at Ishan's. Well, how is Keshav now?" So we knew that there was a connection with Keshav through Ishan, and they were all Brahmos and everything. He was very ill. M, "Indeed, I've heard so too, but I believe he is well now." Sri Ramakrishna, "I made a vow to worship the mother with green coconut and sugar." Yeah, the Davchini. On Keshav's recovery. "Sometimes in the early hours of the morning, I would wake up and cry before her." Then he would go to the Kali temple, and standing before the image of Mother Kali. Would cry before her, "Mother, please make Keshav well again. If Keshav doesn't live, whom shall I talk with when I go to Calcutta?" Now remember, his very close, intimate disciples, only one or two had come. His Rakal had come, Narendra had come the year before, maybe Lato Maharaj was there. Most of the close disciples came afterwards. Some only came at the very end, only a year or two before he passed away, even. The Swami Trigunatitananda and Subodh, also, yeah. "Tell me, do you know of a certain Mr. Cook who has come to Calcutta? Is it true that he is giving lectures? Once Keshav took me on a steamer, and this Mr. Cook too was in the party." That is one of the famous steamer rides that they took. "Yes, sir, I've heard something like that, but I've never been to his lectures. I don't know much about him." Sri Ramakrishna, "Pratap's brother came here." It must be Pratap Majumdar. Huh?
I don't know.
Or could it be Hajra?
Hajra also.
He used to call him Hajra. He
Yeah.
very, very rarely called him Pratap though.
But here he says.
And it's hard to know.
Yeah.
I think it means Majumdar because M wouldn't know about Hajra. And he's talking about all Brahmo people. And it's not important. Pratap's brother came here. He stayed a few days. He had nothing to do and said he wanted to live here. I came to know that he had left his wife and children with his father-in-law. He has a whole brood of them. So I took him to task. Just fancy. He is the father of so many children. Will people from the neighborhood feed them and bring them up? He isn't even ashamed that someone else is feeding his wife and children. See how intimately Sri Ramakrishna is talking to him, who's a stranger. They just met, telling all of these personal things and everything. Will people from the neighborhood feed him and bring them up? He isn't even ashamed that someone else is feeding his wife and children, and that they've been left at his father-in-law's house. I scolded him very hard and asked him to look for a job. Then he was willing to leave here. Are you married? M, yes, sir. Sri Ramakrishna with a shudder. Oh, Ramlal, alas, he is married. Ramlal was Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, who was also one of the temple priests there. So you can imagine, he said, oh my God, oh Ramlal, alas, he is married. Like one guilty of a terrible offense, M sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the ground. He thought, is it such a wicked thing to get married? The master continued, have you any children? M this time could hear the beating of his own heart. He whispered in a trembling voice, yes, sir, I have children. Very sadly, Sri Ramakrishna said, ah me, he even has children. Thus rebuked, M sat speechless. His pride had received a blow. After a few minutes, Sri Ramakrishna looked at him kindly and said affectionately, you see, you have certain good signs. This was the whole point. I know them by looking at a person's forehead, his eyes, and so on. Tell me now, what kind of person is your wife? Has she spiritual attributes, Vidyamaya? Or is she under the power of avidya? And she is all right. It doesn't give a very high, great praise. She is all right, but I am afraid she is ignorant. Master, with evident displeasure, and you are a man of knowledge. M had yet to learn the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. He was thinking book learning, of course. Up to this time, his conception had been that one got knowledge from books and schools. Later on, he gave up this false conception. He was taught that to know God is knowledge and not to know Him ignorance. When Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, and you are a man of knowledge, M's ego was again badly shocked. Master, well, do you believe in God with form or without form? M, rather surprised, said to himself, how can one believe in God without form when one believes in God with form? And if one believes in God without form, how can one believe that God has a form? Can these two contradictory ideas be true at the same time? Can a white liquid like milk be black? Now, of course, as a member of the Brahmo Samaj, and as a highly educated, Western educated person, he didn't care for this idea of God with form, because God with form, in those days, in that context, basically meant an image, idol worship, what they called idol worship. It wasn't this very high ideal of Saguna Brahman or anything like that. They generally took it that way. So this is why the Brahmos always talked about worshiping the formless God, because they didn't like the image worship, anything like that. M, sir, I like to think of God as formless. Master, very good. It is enough to have faith in either aspect. You believe in God without form, that is quite all right. But never for a moment think that this alone is true and all else is false. Remember that God with form is just as true as God without form. But hold fast to your own conviction. Now, I've often thought about this. We talk very glibly about God with form. What do we mean? What do we mean when we talk about the formless aspect of God? We know. This is our Brahman, infinite Brahman and everything. But what is God with form? And what did it mean to people at that time? Beyond this side, because Sri Ramakrishna is obviously not just talking about an image. Yes, Olina.
Like Rama and Sita, like.
Yes, so this is one way, of course. One way will be the avatar, the divine incarnation, God taking form, coming at a certain time, Rama, Sita, Krishna, Radha, all of that. Then what else? Yeah, see, we have one intelligent person here. Anybody else who can come up with an answer?
Compassionate.
Okay, we can have this idea. This will be more saguna. This was what the Brahmas worshipped actually. Nirakar saguna, formless but with attributes.
So that we had a plethora of images like Durga, Lakshmi, all of them. So at least Brahmos must have thought of that also as idol worship.
Yeah, so we can have these avatars, we can have all the Puranic ideas of God. Yeah, will be gods and goddesses. That can be God with form. Then we have this Purusha idea. The whole universe is the form of God, is the body of God. This is also one of the ways. Then we have this vision of the universal form, where hands and feet everywhere, eyes and ears everywhere. So everyone all together forms the body of God that way. So there are many different ways of understanding this idea of God with form. And then also worshipping God through the image. And then this idea of the water forming into blocks of ice.
Yeah.
A very subjective way of thinking of God with form, right? Which melts back into the formless. So there's all these different ways of looking at what we mean when we talk about this. God has a formless aspect and aspect with form. So God can take any form, but this whole universe is the form of God, is the body of God.
To worship a formless God, you have to reach a certain state of mind. Otherwise, you cannot, just like meditation. You got to start with something physical or structural, something feel. Then only, once you pass, as you said, once you reach the stage of Swami's stage, there they don't need rules. They can do formless God. But Tuch people, people like us, who are not at that level, how can we worship formless God when we can't even meditate a formless anything? Even to meditate, we need a crutch, a worm, a sound, a picture, an image.
Yes.
We
Some
can't do
concrete,
that.
something tangible.
Something to anchor
is
it to.
is a help. It's an aid. But this concrete aid can be in the form of the guna, saguna, and still be nirakar. So it can be formless, because this is what we have in the whole Western tradition, old Christianity, Islam, Judaism. There's no form of God, but God has a personality. There's a loving God, compassionate God. But as you say, that at least gives us something that we can hold on to. The absolute formless reality is not something that we worship. It's something we try to merge the mind in. We had a devotee who used to very humorously describe the Brahmos as saying that we worship the lotus feet of the formless infinite reality. No, it's true. The human mind likes something concrete, but at the same time, the human mind very often can rebel against this idea that what we're calling God, such a subtle thing, can have some physical form or some tangible form. So we have both difficulties from both sides of it. Then he says, remember, God with form is just as true as God without form, but hold fast to your own conviction, the nishtha. That be open-minded, but the path that you want to follow, you hold on to it dearly. The assertion that both are equally true amazed M. He had never learned this from his books. Thus his ego received a third blow. Now notice, never once does he say that this is nonsense, that Sri Ramakrishna is saying something, just a bold contradiction, that's no one could possibly take any of this seriously. He's putting seeing the fault in himself, that he never thought deeply about these things. This is Shraddha. We were talking about that reverential attitude. He recognized that this is a real holy man. So there must be some meaning, deeper meaning to his words. The assertion that both are equally true amazed him. He had never learnt this from his books. Thus his ego received a third blow. But since it was not yet completely crushed, he came forward to argue with the master a little more. M. Sir, suppose one believes in God with form. Certainly he is not the clay image. So this is what I was saying. That in those days, being a Brahmo, that's what would come into his mind. Not some very subtle doctrine of this universe forming the body of God, anything like that, but this idea of image worship, or idol worship as they because they condemned it. To be a Brahmo, you had to sign a pledge that you wouldn't participate in that. You wouldn't enter a temple where there was an idol image. Master interrupting, but why clay? It is an image of spirit. M could not quite understand the significance of this image of spirit. But sir, he said to the master, one should explain to those who worship the clay image that it is not God. And that while worshipping it, they should have God in view and not the clay image. One should not worship clay. Master, sharply. I don't know what it says. Birokto. Something. Yeah. That's the one hobby of you Calcutta people. Giving lectures and bringing others to the light. He didn't have a very high opinion of the Calcutta people. Nobody ever stops to consider how to get the light himself. Who are you to teach others? He who is the Lord of the universe will teach everyone. He alone teaches us, who has created this universe, who has made the sun and moon, men and beasts, and all other beings, who has provided means for their sustenance, who has given children parents, and endowed them with love to bring them up. The Lord has done so many things. Will He not show people the way to worship Him? If they need teaching, then He will be the teacher. He is our inner guide, Antaryaman. Sri Ramakrishna liked that idea. God dwelling within isn't simply this pure consciousness or this light of the sun illuminating everything. It's a living presence. And we can feel guidance even if we're sensitive to it. This was his idea of the Divine Mother dwelling within. Suppose there is an error in worshipping the clay image. Doesn't God know that through it He alone is being invoked? Will He be pleased with that very worship? He will be pleased with that very worship. Why should you get a headache over it? You would better try for knowledge and devotion yourself. This time M felt that his ego was completely crushed. He now said to himself, yes, he has spoken the truth. What need is there for me to teach others? Have I known God? Do I really love Him? I haven't room enough for myself in my bed, and I am inviting my friend to share it with me.
It's a Bengali proverb.
Shankari.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shankari.
How does it go?
Yeah, and Apni Shute Paina Shankari ke dake.
Somebody here talking. There's no room for yourself, and you're calling
Your friend
Shankari
to share
to
the
come.
light.
I know nothing about God, yet I am trying to teach others. What a shame. How foolish I am. This is not mathematics or history or literature that one can teach it to others. No, this is the deep mystery of God. What He says appeals to me. See, Shram says, M, he didn't take any of this personally. He didn't get angry. He didn't get annoyed. He didn't think, well, how can he speak to me this way? Doesn't he know that I have advanced college degrees? I'm a teacher and all of this. He had that humility. This was M's first argument with the master, and happily his last. So he learned his lesson. Master, you were talking of worshipping the clay image. Even if the image is made of clay, there is need for that sort of worship. God Himself has provided different forms of worship. He who is the Lord of the universe has arranged all these forms to suit different men in different stages of knowledge. The mother cooks different dishes to suit the stomachs of her different children. Suppose she has 5 children. If there is a fish to cook, she prepares various dishes from it: pilau, pickled fish, fried fish, and so on. He doesn't mention fish head here. Yeah, he does in other places. I think so on means, what are you going to do?
He has 5 children, so you have to cook.
Have to
these
have
5
others,
children.
yes. To suit their different tastes and powers of digestion. So this I've mentioned so many times this week. Ruchi Ved, and Bhed, and Bhajam Shakti. Do you understand me? Sri Ramakrishna to him, M, humbly. Yes, sir. Now, M will ask questions that are for all eternity and for all humanity. that this is the great blessing that we have, that M asked these particular questions to Sri Ramakrishna, and the answers that he gives covers the entire teachings of the entire gospel. We can get everything from this one section. It covers all the aspects of spiritual life. Each of the four yogas will be specifically mentioned here. M. Humbly. Yes, sir. How, sir, may we fix our minds on God? Okay. This is one thing we need to know. Master. Repeat God's name and sing His glories. Okay. And keep holy company. Right? And now and then visit God's devotees and holy men. The mind cannot dwell on God if it is immersed day and night in worldliness. We have to remove ourselves from this atmosphere that makes us think in a particular way, act in a particular way. We withdraw ourselves there, and then we're free. Immersed day and night in worldliness, in worldly duties and responsibilities. It is most necessary to do what?
Repeat the name.
No, he's saying that.
Go into solitude.
Prashant.
Ah,
Yeah, good.
good.
Yeah, solitude.
It is most necessary to go into solitude now and then and think of God. To fix the mind on God is very difficult in the beginning, unless one practices meditation in solitude. See how much emphasis he's giving to this. Solitude. When a tree is young, it should be fenced all around. Otherwise, it may be destroyed by cattle. To meditate, you should withdraw within yourself or retire to a secluded corner or to the forest. Mone kone bone. Sri Ramakrishna, he had a gift for these little phrases too. Easy things to remember. Mone kone bone. Yeah. So either, right? Yeah. Mon in the mind. Kon is a corner. Kone. Bon is a forest. Mone kone bone. So that means that a nice, quiet, peaceful, pleasant place like the forest, or we go into a corner. That means some place where no one sees us. We're a little away from someone. But the real thing is that no matter what we do, everything takes place within the mind, within the heart. Moni. This is real meditation. We dive deep within. That's our real solitude. Then it doesn't matter who's around us or not around us. We forget the external world. So, mone kone bone. To meditate, you should withdraw within yourself or retire to a secluded corner or to the forest. And you should always discriminate between the real and the unreal. So, we've had bhakti yoga, right? Chanting the names of God and doing all of those spiritual practices. We've had meditation, Raja Yoga, right? Now, we have Jnana Yoga, discrimination. By discriminating thus, God alone is real, and you should always discriminate between the real and the unreal. God alone is real, the eternal substance. All else is unreal, that is impermanent. Okay.
What does he use as unreal? Do you know?
He may say mithya here, but instantly following it up with anitya. Anyone? Do we have the Bengali here?
Should have them.
I have it in my room. I can bring it down.
Oh, you
if
mean
we need it.
upstairs?
Yeah.
Okay, ours is not here. Ours is
Oh,
in the
okay.
other. Ours is in the other house.
Okay. It's in my iPad. You'll see the red cover.
Maharaj, we can also look it up on the web.
No, let me bring it down. It'll be easier. So I think it's by my bed or else on the desk. God alone is real, the eternal substance. All else is unreal, that is impermanent. By discriminating thus, one should shake off impermanent objects from the mind. So this is not just philosophical speculation. It's meant to lead us to dispassion. If we can convince ourselves that there's no substance to the things of the world, then we won't be so attached to them. So he says, shake off impermanent objects from the mind. Then we'll get to Karma Yoga. How ought we to live in the world? Thank you. How do I go back to the beginning of this? Search. Oh, I can't search. Okay. This is a long introduction. Where is it from? How should we fix our minds on God? Oh, okay. He says, Ishwari Shot ki na, Nitto Bostu, or Shot Ashot, Asat. He doesn't say Mithya. He says Ashot, Kina or Nitto. That means impermanent. So yeah, he doesn't use this term Mithya very often. But it's still, something means, because Sadasat is a common thing, so it means, yeah, unreal, you can say. How ought we to live in the world? So now this will get the teachings on Karma Yoga. So he's going through all of the 4 yogas here, of course without saying anything. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. Master. And we get these are really precious teachings. Do all your duties, but keep your mind on God. Live with all, with wife and children, father and mother, and serve them. Now somehow he knew these are so pertinent to M's particular situation. Live with all, with wife and children, father and mother, and serve them. Treat them as if they were very dear to you, but know in your heart of hearts that they do not belong to you. So this extreme dispassion. A maidservant in the house of a rich man performs all the household duties, but her thoughts are fixed on her own home and her native village. She brings up her master's children as if they were her own. She even speaks of them as my Rama or my Hari, but in her own mind she knows very well that they do not belong to her at all. These are very strong words. How many mothers can think that about children? Now, remember that the maidservant in the rich man's home also loves the children and treats them with great devotion and affection and everything. But attachment isn't there. She may be asked to leave and work in somebody else's house, and immediately it'll be to somebody else. The tortoise moves about in the water, but can you guess where her thoughts are? There on the bank, where her eggs are lying. Do all your duties in the world, but keep your mind on God. If you enter the world without first cultivating love for God, you will be entangled more and more. You will be overwhelmed with its danger, its grief, its sorrows. And the more you think of worldly things, the more you will be attached to them. First, rub your hands with oil, and then break open the jackfruit. Otherwise, they will be smeared with its sticky milk. First, secure the oil of divine love, and then set your hands to the duties of the world. But one must go into solitude. Again, see? How many times we'll talk about this? One must go into solitude to attain this divine love. To get butter from milk, you must let it set into curd in a secluded spot. If it is too much disturbed, milk won't turn into curd. Next, you must put aside all other duties, sit in a quiet spot and churn the curd. Only then do you get butter. Further, by meditating on God in solitude, the mind acquires knowledge, dispassion, and devotion. So these three things. Knowledge, because in solitude we can experience ourselves as we really are, not as others see us. We can experience ourselves as pure consciousness, as awareness, as this center from which the whole universe comes out. We really experience ourselves differently when we're alone. It's something that has to be experimented with. And dispassion, because we realize that we can fulfill ourselves, that we don't need anything else, even other people, that we have everything within us that can bring us that ultimate contentment. And devotion. So when we're in solitude also, we can feel the presence of God within. We can develop this devotional attitude. But the very same mind goes downward if it dwells in the world. In the world there is only one thought, lust and gold. The world is water and the mind milk. If you pour milk into water, they become one. They get mixed up. We get mixed up with the world. We can't separate ourselves from it. You cannot find the pure milk anymore, but turn the milk into curd and churn it into butter. Then when the butter is placed in water, it will float. So practice spiritual disciplines in solitude. And obtain the butter of knowledge and love. See? How beautiful. Even if you keep that butter in the water of the world, the two will not mix. The butter will float. That means Sri Ramakrishna will always emphasize this idea of withdrawing from the world at a certain stage, the early stages of spiritual life. Then, once you've developed a little bit of strength, inner strength, then we can go back into the world. And we won't have that same danger of losing ourselves and getting completely attached to everything. So he wants the tree to get a little bit strong first, before we can take the hedge down. And then he says, when it gets to be a big tree, you can even tie an elephant to it, and nothing will happen. Together with this, you must practice discrimination. This world is impermanent. God is the only eternal substance. What does a man get with money? Food, clothes, and a dwelling place, nothing more. You cannot realize God with its help. Therefore, money can never be the goal of life. That is the power of discrimination. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I recently read a Sanskrit play called Prabodha Chandrodaya. It deals with discrimination. Master. Yes, discrimination about objects. Consider, what is there in money? Discriminate. You will find that even the body of another human being consists of bones, flesh, fat, and other disagreeable things. Why should one give up God and direct his attention to such things? Why should a man forget God for their sake? Now we get second question from him. Is it possible to see God? Okay, so he was. We had the first question: how can we fix our minds on God? And we get this 4 yogas, really. Then, is it possible to see God? One thing to fix the mind on God, but does that mean that we can have God realization? Master, yes, certainly. And what's his first piece of advice? living in solitude now and then, repeating God's name and singing His glories, and discriminating between the real and the unreal. These are the means to employ to see Him. So again, solitude, and then again repeating God's name, singing His glories, then again discrimination, all of these things. M. Under what conditions does one see God? Third question. Master. We'll get back to cry to the Lord with an intensely yearning heart, and you will certainly see Him. This is the one thing necessary. We get over and over in the Gospel. People shed a whole jug of tears for wife and children. They swim in tears for money. But who weeps for God? Cry to Him with a real cry. Yeah, he used to say if you can weep 24 hours straight, you will have God realization. Weep for God. Then the Master sang, cry to your mother Shama with a real cry, O mind. And how can she hold herself from you? How can Shama stay away? How can your mother Kali hold herself away? O mind, if you are in earnest, bring her an offering of bell leaves and hibiscus flowers. Lay at her feet your offering, and with it mingle the fragrant sandal paste of love. Continuing, he said, what time is dinner? 9 o'clock?
8:30.
Okay, we're already past. Okay, I'll just read to the bottom here. Continuing, he said, longing is like the rosy dawn. Okay, we've seen this before. This idea of the sunrise, the Chandrodaya, Arunodaya. He says that, yes, we see the little pink there in the sky. We know that the sunrise is about to happen. Longing, so there's Vakulata. Longing is like the rosy dawn. After the dawn, out comes the sun. Longing is followed by the vision of God. Nothing else required. Of course, a lot of things required to get longing. God reveals Himself to a devotee who feels drawn to Him by the combined force of these three attractions. The attraction of worldly possessions for the worldly man, the child's attraction for its mother, and the husband's attraction for the chaste wife. If one feels drawn to Him by the combined force of these three attractions, not any one of the three, all three together, combined force, then through it one can attain Him. The point is to love God even as the mother loves the child. The chaste wife loves her husband, and the worldly man loves his wealth. Add together these three forces of love, these three powers of attraction, and give it all to God. Then you will certainly see Him. It is necessary to pray to Him with a longing heart. The kitten knows only how to call its mother, crying mew, mew. It remains satisfied wherever its mother puts it. We're getting all of his favorite examples all in one. And the mother cat puts the kitten sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes on the floor, and sometimes on the bed, and sometimes in the ashes in the fireplace. When it suffers, it cries only mew, mew. That's all it knows. But as soon as the mother hears this cry, wherever she may be, she comes to the kitten. That's the end of the second visit. Om Niranjanam Yetyamanandarupam Bhaktanukam Bhaktaravikramai Ishavataram Parameshamishvidyam Tam Ramakrishnam Sirisam.
I have one question.
Yes.
In the Bengali version, or at least in the English version, right now when he's talking about God, he keeps saying he. Is that how he's?
There's no he or she in Bengali.
No.
It'll just be she or tini. Yeah, so.
That's just the translation.
Yeah. It would be better to say she because he has in mind Divine Mother, but it would probably also sound a little odd. So this is a little problem we have with language.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound very good. she would sound strange to most people. So I think they felt that he was the closest. Yeah.
In Bengali, he uses for God tini. Tini means
Tini.
respectfully.
Teeny, yeah,
The respectful he, she.
yeah, right.
So he does the respectful one, but he does not, in Bengali there is no gender.
So teeny refers to both he and she.
Yeah.
The respectful form, she,
Huh?
the regular form.
Yeah, right, you don't-
And when he talks to the divine, when he talks about her, she's teeny. When he talks to her, she's tui.
tui, yeah,
Yeah.
not to her.
Yeah, like a little child will talk to his mother.
See,
Yeah, right.
No, tui means two. The
Two-
nearest
two
to
form.
you, two.
And the other is tumi. The other is tumi.
With mother, she often says tui. Oh, why did you appear just now?
Yeah. Yeah, generally if he's talking about God to other people, say teeny. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah, good. Very good. This is how we started the retreat.
Yeah.
With that thought.